What up, everybody? In today's video, I will be talking about life-centered design. I want to know what life-centered design is and how we can actually use it. What are methods that we can apply in order to do life-centered design? And is it actually worth it? Does it have a benefit? Let's figure it out. Let's go. There we are. It's all about life-centered design. I just recently came across a few videos. I have heard it before, but I never really got into it. And I never really knew what it was. So I want to take the moment and actually check up on some information. What does it stand for? What's the background? What's the goal? And what can we as designers do with it? So let me share with you what I found from the Life-Centered Design School. Life-centered design is an emerging design approach expanding human-centered and profit growth-focused business to support a balanced existence for all life on the planet. Right, so overall, the gist that I get from it is that it's supposed to be like a more holistic approach to design that also considers the stakeholders that are not directly involved or not directly targeted in the, let's say, status quo human-centered design process. It's not only about the user, but about like all the different things around the user, the system, nature, animals, right? So it's trying to expand beyond the predominantly user and business focused design approach by integrating all peoples, all animals, and all environments. So this is pretty big of a statement, right? It's very difficult, I would say, to succeed in being able to integrate and consider all these beings and places and spaces. But basically, we are seeing a movement away from focusing towards the end user, towards adding value to nature, actually, rather than taking value just from nature and communities and the economy. So it's more like also giving back. To me, this pretty much sounds like it's a sustainability-driven environmental design approach that is trying to be sure that we consider all the environmental factors from the get-go throughout the design process, right? So we heard about circular design, planet-centric design, disruptive design, all these things go into a similar direction. So after all these definitions and initial impressions, I still feel it's rather vague to me and I have some unclarities about what this actually supposed to mean. And it feels like very idealistic and hopeful. And I don't say that in a negative, judgmental way, right? I think it's good. We need idealistic thinking to push us in a direction to integrate things further into the mainstream to improve. But at the same time, I feel like this is really difficult to realize in the regular design process because it's so vast and so grand. If you look at the history, what I found is that basically it pointed to Viktor Papanek, who was the author of Design for the Real World, like one of the big design classics, right? And there he widely appealed for inclusion, social justice, and sustainability in design. And he set some of the fundamental ideas and connected them to design. Then we find ideas from biomimicry as well, and cradle-to-cradle design, which all became toolboxes and pool of inspiration for life-centered design ecosystems, right? Starting in the 2010s, the term life-centered design emerged as a clear distinction and also as a clear opposition to human-centered design. So we don't focus on the human purely, but we consider life as a whole, which is plant life, animal life, human life. Often things are better understood with examples. So let me show you some of the examples where life-centered design was apparently applied. So this is the Biotope building in France, and it was apparently built on life-centered design principles. It's an office building designed as a wildlife-filled home for the metropole European Belle-Île. It prioritizes nature, not only for its contribution to wellness at work, but also for mindfully fostering biodiversity and supporting its vitality within the urban environment. So we do see there's a lot of green areas on this office building directly integrated into the architecture. Animals, wildlife take part and live there in the city. I think that's interesting, right? So you plan to make a building, but you also, in the same step, plan it in such a way that not only humans can thrive there, but other beings as well. Let me go to the next one. Making of a green building. This is the, what's it called? The Brock Center in Virginia, I suppose. And here they made this whole architecture considering all these factors that play into also just the energy, the water piping system, ventilation, lighting, the thermics, insulation, right? All of these things were considered, like for example, natural ventilation to reduce the need for electricity. The heating and cooling systems are not needed approximately 15% of the year because the way they arranged with the sun, but also considering the wind of the beach and the ocean that is coming across. So there's all these different aspects that they consider when they were building this center. Here's some images. it doesn't strike me as a specifically environmental friendly building, but maybe that's also interesting, that it doesn't always have to shout, I'm environmentally friendly. These are mostly architectural, and I feel like life-centered design does fit specifically for architecture because it's about spaces, right? Where animals could actually be relevant, where nature is much more of a pressing problem or factor than for most of our day-to-day products compared to, let's say, a smartphone. But I also wanted to see if I can find examples that are not architectural but are of other nature. And here are some other examples. For example, mycelium-based packaging. We have the Fairphone and other things. Let me go through some of the examples as well online so we can check right away. So this is, for example, some packaging made from mushrooms, more or less, mycelium, right? So what they do is they have this raw material, if you will, and they put it into a mold, and then under the right circumstances, it starts to grow into this more solidified thing that holds and binds together, and then it gets the shape of the mold. And it's also have been used already in a big variety of different projects. I've seen it like for cosmetics. I worked on a project where it was used for a remote. I think it has a very unique appearance. It's very tactile, right? Feels very rough. At the same time, I don't think it works for every product in the same fashion. Then we have the Fairphone, right? So the concept of the Fairphone is it's supposed to be repairable and durable, so you can use it for really long term. And it's also looking at its environmental impact as a whole. So it's trying to take all these different factors into the design while providing you with a state-of-the-art smart device in terms of like camera, processing power, and all the features and functions that you would expect from a smartphone these days, right? So, and also price-wise, it's like not crazy expensive. And they also expanded their portfolio with headphones, the FairBuds XL, for example, and then they have the FairBuds small ones. So here you can see the entire lineup. And the cool thing is they also take in your old phone, so they recycle the stuff, or at least they give it to somebody who does. So I think that's really worth having a look, and it's a good example of sustainable procedures and processes that we could apply for our own hardware design as industrial designers. Then I looked at Biome, which is like a company that basically does research in what they could potentially do more sustainably in terms of material research. And I used as the example the Optech, which is apparently their project, the umbrella term for materials that are based on food and agricultural waste products. So they take this waste and turn it into substrate that can be used for 3D printing, for milling, molding. So you can basically, or also just as a substitute for wood, MDF or OSB, right? That's pretty cool. It's cold compostable, circular, natural, remanufacturable. So it does consider all these different aspects and has a lot of character, right? The color variation, a lot of structure. So I think this is very attractive as a material. So maybe that's something to work with in the future. These materials usually have some drawbacks in terms of mechanical stability and strength. That doesn't always have to be the case, and not every project does require like the biggest amount of load capacity to go with. So overall, I think this is really the aesthetically valuable material samples that we can see here. So I think that's pretty cool. Check it out. Right. So these were then some examples where they applied it to hardware goods, but also apparently sustainable UX design is a thing now. I never heard of it, but UX designers are also becoming more aware of their energy consumption of digital products that they develop. So now we saw some examples. Now let's see what are specific methodologies that we can actually use in order to apply life-centered design to our own design approaches, right? Are there tools that we can use in order to bring it into our day-to-day? Here's a list of tools that I found. Not all of them are exclusively life-centered design, right? But still they work towards a similar idea. And so here's an example of biomimicry where they looked at the skin of an elephant and they figured that there's moisture that's trapped in the wrinkles and creases of the elephant skin. That helps to cool the elephant even in the scorching sun, right? The gecko, how do they stick on vertical surfaces? You can use it also on shoes, aerodynamics, basically inspired by the pufferfish. I think that's really cool. Velcro, one of the classic examples, right? We have shark skin in athletics and sports, like it finds application everywhere. But as I mentioned, it's nature inspired, but not necessarily applied also to help nature or to give back to nature, even though it could potentially serve for the similar purpose. Then we have non-human personas. So I think this is an interesting tool because most of designers are aware of personas. They know how to work with them. They know how to use them. So the non-human persona is then just a slight adaptation to an existing tool. So this is a structured tool where you create a persona for an ecosystem, a species, natural system, or whatever, and you assign its needs, its pain points. You include it as a partner persona to design for in reviews. Just what is it? It be, right? Could be the non-human persona. It's an insect. What does it do? How long does it live? What are the pain points? It can lose its habitat and lack flowering plants. Pesticides are dangerous. Disease and parasites can be critical. Climate change is a problem now for them, right? So they need access to diverse flowering plants, clean water sources, safe places. And just by having it present while you're doing the design, you potentially can be more considerate of the impact on these beings as well. And this can also just be like forests, for example, right? So it's not limited to animals. It can be anything, really. Then we have the ecosystems map, which basically is trying to map all actors, which are human, but also non-human and organizational, that the product touches across its entire life cycle. And the better the ecosystem is understood, the better is also the impact understood that the new product potentially has, and that can be now altered or designed in such a way that it adds to nature. I was looking into an example. So this would be an ecosystem map for a smartphone, and we do see there are so many different stakeholders just in terms of materials and manufacturing, right? So there must be people that extract the materials, refine them, assemble them. Then we have software. It has to be programmed. It has to be installed. It has to be provided. There is IPs. We need connection to the internet and Wi-Fi. So you already see that smartphone is highly complex. There's so many different stakeholders that play into it. And all these could potentially have further impacts on their environments and their working spaces and places. In this example, it was from a study where they did it for a chair from IKEA. They looked at the different stakeholders. So there's laws, actors, right? Non-human actors are laws, repair policies, web servers, websites, CO2, landfills. So all these things are also equally relevant if you want to map the ecosystem to get a better understanding of what is being impacted and what is relevant for the product. It's crazy, right? There's just so much, it potentially goes endless. So I'm not sure how useful this actually is if you apply it, because it's so broad that you cannot consider everything at once. It just becomes too overwhelming also for a designer. But maybe just already thinking about the most important aspects that are not human can already be an indication or a memory or reminder of what to do instead, or how to design. Then we have the circular design approach, right? So it's basically designing products with the end of life in mind. So what does happen after the product can no longer be used? Can it be recycled or not? Can it be disassembled? Is it glued? That's a problem usually. Where can it be disassembled? Can it be repaired instead? Can you recover the material to use it for other products in the future? So I have this diagram here. So when you design it and make it, you also have to think about the logistics, the use, repair, recycle, regenerate, right? And then the goal would be to create a cycle, a full cycle, that everything that you put in also goes somewhere at the end, either in your own products or in some other people's products, other brands' products, right? But it doesn't just goes into landfill and cannot be used any further. I think that is one of the most commonly applied design approaches where the environment does play a role and is also well recognized in the industry already. Then we have the futures wheel or the speculative design. Here the idea is that you map second and third order consequences of design decisions, right? So if your product would scale to 1 million units, what would happen to the forest? What would the impact be to the labor pool? Well, how would that impact the repair economy, right? All these things you could potentially make out. You can basically also go further than just second, third order consequences, go beyond and beyond, and also get a glimpse of how this potentially shapes the future. Then we have the life cycle assessment. This is also a pretty common tool already being used, not specifically for life-centered design, but generally it's a quantitative method to measure the environmental impact of a product's entire life also. So you really try to find out how much CO2 is being produced in the production of the raw material, in the working of the material, right? In the actual production of your own product. And it can be really extensive and it gives you actual data rather than intuitions. But also it's very complex to create a complete picture of a life cycle, because there are so many factors that play into it. There's also just very specific software just for creating life cycle assessments. And then we have the slow framework, which is one of the tools that I found that is specifically designed for life-centered design approaches, right? And it is supposed to basically set the pace for your design. S means start differently, do the opposite of what you usually do. Like instead of just doing a brainstorm like you would always do, try to do a design walk, go out there, be in nature, try to surround yourself in the relevant environments. Then the L stands for learn to be uncomfortable. go out of your comfort zone. Growth happens outside of it. So I'm not sure what that means specifically, right? Just learn to be uncomfortable. I mean, okay. Then we have observed your ecosystem. And that means also specifically listen to your specific ecosystem that you design for, to understand it, not just on the surface level, but really experiencing it also as well, right? Engage all your senses, notice patterns and relationships, stay curious, ask questions. And then the W stands for wait with decision making. Give ideas time to grow, right? Delay the judgment to let understanding deepen. Plant seeds, not solutions, to start something and let it evolve. So I think this is an interesting approach. I think definitely worth checking out. Just also creativity-wise, it's always great to expose yourself to nature because your mind can recharge. It's not like looking at your phone all the time where your energy, mental capacity is drained. But from the forest, from nature, from greenery, it's actually the opposite. You are being recharged. It doesn't drain your energy, right? So this is always good to do. And I think it should definitely be something to consider for our design process in the future. So now that we know what life-centered design is, that we saw some examples in architecture, but also beyond, and what methods we can apply in order to do life-centered design, here is the critique that I feel is reasonable. So I was thinking there was the study where I took the ecosystems map from, right, with the chair. And I felt like, okay, how does a chair that is designed just basically capitalist human-centered way, how does it differ from a life-centered design chair? And the response is not that straightforward. So it potentially looks exactly the same, but it's just asking more questions before the process of designing even begins in terms of like material consumption, impact on the environment, and so forth, and also more questions afterwards, right? What happens after production, repairability, all these aspects that we mentioned, right? But I felt like life-centered design would also impact the aesthetic or the decision-making of the design, right? But that does not necessarily have to be the case. It can be if you think about repairability and stuff like that, right? Material choice potentially, but it's not a must-see. You don't necessarily recognize something as life-centered design. So I think that was interesting learning for me in this process, but I also wonder if that's something we should strive for, if we should make something look like it also is environmentally friendly, it is designed for the greater good of all entities, right? I feel like it's very difficult to implement into the regular design process because it's so expensive and it's just a lot of talking, discussion, a lot of research that needs to be done. It takes a lot of time from what I see, what I feel, and not necessarily does improve the design in human-centered related evaluation criteria, right? It obviously will make something more environmentally friendly, right? More sustainable. But that usually is not the driving factor during our day-to-day as a designer, unfortunately. I do understand this as a counter movement to the capitalistic approach also, the design heavy thing, just bring out a new phone every 2 years at least, right? In order to get your people going, get the money in. But what I also understood now from experience in the industry is that companies only make something sustainable and environmentally friendly if they feel like it also is financially sensible to do. If they expect higher profits, if they want to target a specific user, or if the alternative is not cheaper than the eco-friendly option. Overall, I feel like life-centered design is interesting. It's very vast and complex, but it also feels just like another sustainability-focused and environmentally driven design approach like we already know and see in the field, just with a more broad terminology. But I'm curious to try and see if I can actually find ways to implement it into my design. So I hope you were able to learn something today. If you know now what life-centered design is, then I'm happy. And if you are able to achieve it, let me know in the comments how so, if there are other methods that I haven't spoken about. Thank you very much. See you around.